I had spent the entire night hunched over my sewing machine, forcing my tired eyes to stay open while the needle danced through fabric I could barely see anymore. Every stitch felt like a memory. Every seam carried a prayer. As the clock ticked its way into dawn, I tied the final knot on what I believed was the most meaningful gown I had ever made, my daughter's wedding dress. When the morning sun finally slipped through my kitchen window, it fell directly onto the gown, giving its soft ivory fabric a gentle glow. It wasn't a designer masterpiece from New York City, and it didn't shimmer with rhinestones imported from somewhere luxurious. But it was made with something no boutique could sell, a mother's love that had survived decades of sacrifice. I folded the gown carefully, protecting it with an old sheet, and walked the 2 blocks to my daughter's townhouse. Emily had moved far beyond the simple life we once shared. When I stepped inside, her friends were already gathered around her breakfast nook, sipping lattes and laughing like they lived in a world made entirely of perfect Instagram filters. Emily looked stunning, modern, polished, a version of herself I barely recognized anymore. For a moment, pride washed over me. Then she noticed what I held. "Mom, is that the dress?" she asked, her perfectly lined eyebrows lifting in doubt. I smiled, excited, nervous, hopeful. "Yes, sweetheart. I finished it last night." I unfolded the sheet gently, revealing the gown. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emily stared at it the way someone might stare at a child's drawing pinned to a gallery wall, not sure whether to laugh or cringe. Then she didn't hesitate. "Mom, this looks like something from a thrift store." Her friends giggled into their cups. My throat tightened. I spent weeks on it, Emily." She didn't care. She grabbed the gown by its delicate lace bodice, walked to the stainless steel trash bin, and shoved it inside without a second thought. "I'm not walking down the aisle in something homemade," she snapped. "I already ordered my real dress, the one from Paris." The room blurred. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. But I didn't argue. I didn't even let myself breathe too deeply, afraid it would come out as a sob. I simply turned around and walked out before any tears betrayed me. The sun outside was warm, but my body felt like it was trapped in winter. I walked home with empty hands and a heart that felt scraped raw. In my mind, I saw the dress lying inside that trash can like an abandoned piece of my soul. Back home, I sat in front of my sewing machine, the same one my own mother had left me, and let my fingers trace its metal edges. For years, it had been my ally, my lifeline. Today, it felt like a witness to my humiliation. But as I touched the pedal, something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. It was a strange, icy calm. A calm that whispered, "If she does not value what you made, make her see what she threw away." And that was the moment, the exact second, the plan began forming in my mind. That same afternoon, I returned to my daughter's house for the first step of a plan even I didn't fully understand yet, and what I found waiting for me in that trash can changed everything. It took me hours to gather the courage to return to Emily's townhouse. I waited until I knew she had left for her brunch appointments. She never missed those. When her car pulled away, I walked up the porch steps quietly, my heartbeat echoing louder than my footsteps. The spare key she once gave me still worked, though I doubted she even remembered it existed. The house smelled like lavender candles and luxury perfume, nothing like the home we once shared. I moved carefully, listening for any sound, but the rooms were silent. I went straight to the kitchen. The stainless steel trash can sat in the corner, the lid gleaming beneath the soft light. My throat tightened. I lifted it slowly, and there it was. My dress. Crumpled. Stained. Bent out of shape like a discarded memory. For a moment, I just stared at it. My hands trembled. A wave of shame rushed up my chest, but beneath it, something harder took root. I reached inside and lifted the gown out with both hands. It felt heavier than it had that morning, as if it carried all the weight I had swallowed for years. "Look at you," I whispered, smoothing my hand over the wrinkled fabric. She didn't even know what she threw away. The gown was still whole. A little dirty, the seams slightly pulled, but whole. And somehow, it felt like looking at myself, bruised, but still standing. I folded it gently and slipped out the door, closing it behind me without leaving a trace. As I walked home, people passed me on the sidewalk, unaware I was carrying the remains of a broken bond. Once home, I spread the gown across my work table, letting the afternoon sunlight illuminate the flaws. Instead of sadness, something else rose inside me, determination. Because the more I looked at it, the more I realized what this dress really represented. Not rejection. Not humiliation. But opportunity. It wasn't meant to be thrown away. It wasn't meant to be forgotten. And neither was I. I rolled up my sleeves. For the next several nights, I barely slept. My small sewing room became a world of its own, quiet, focused, alive. I repaired the torn seams, one by one. I added new lace along the hem, hand-stitched tiny beads that caught the light like morning dew. Every needle pass felt like stitching myself back together. I wasn't making this dress for Emily anymore. I wasn't even making it for her wedding. I was making it for me. Every bead I added held a memory. Every lace trim carried the echo of sacrifices I had made. Every restored seam whispered a truth I had swallowed for years. I worked until my fingers numbed, until my back ached, until exhaustion blurred my vision. And yet I felt more alive than I had in years. When the gown was finally finished, I hung it on the mirror. It didn't look like the discarded, wrinkled thing I had pulled from the trash. It didn't look like something a poor seamstress stitched in desperation. It looked like something made by a woman who had rediscovered her spine. Beauty radiated from it, not the kind money can buy, but the kind that only grows from resilience. For the first time, I saw myself reflected in that gown. And I realized something with terrifying clarity. I wasn't planning to disappear quietly anymore. I was going to that wedding. Not as a forgotten mother lurking in the back row. But as a woman who had finally remembered her worth. But little did I know, the moment I walked into that ballroom, the entire wedding would freeze, and my daughter's perfect world would begin to crack right in front of everyone. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in a gray, heavy sky, as if the world itself sensed something unsettled. I stood in my small bedroom, staring at myself in the mirror. My hands shook slightly as I pinned my hair up, not out of fear, but out of the strange power that comes from finally standing up after years of bending. I slipped into my own simple cream dress, the one I had worn to my mother's funeral years ago. It wasn't fancy, but it held dignity. And today, dignity mattered more than elegance. Before leaving, I placed the restored gown inside a clean white bag. I folded it with the precision of someone protecting a secret, because that's exactly what it had become. Not a gift. Not an apology. A truth she needed to face. The bus ride to the event center felt endless. Every bump in the road rattled memories loose, the nights I worked late to afford Emily's school supplies, the dresses I stitched for other women's daughters while mine slowly drifted out of reach. By the time I arrived, the Grand Oak Ballroom looked like a postcard. White roses framed the entrance. Golden lights sparkled inside like champagne bubbles. Everything screamed money, perfection, and a world I no longer belonged to. I stepped through the doors quietly. Nobody noticed me. Not at first. Guests laughed. Glasses clinked. Emily and her groom Ethan stood at the center of the room, posing for photos, both glowing with the kind of confidence that comes when life has always said yes to you. Emily looked breathtaking in her imported European gown, the one she chose over mine. And yet, despite its flawless stitching and shimmering fabric, something about it felt hollow. She didn't see me enter. She didn't even look around. In her world, mothers like me blended into the wallpaper. I made my way to the far corner of the ballroom, standing near the tall drapes like a ghost. A few guests glanced at me with polite confusion, as if wondering who had let the help wander in. A woman approached, Ethan's mother, elegant and sharp-eyed. "You must be Emily's mother," she said with the kind of smile that judged more than it welcomed. "Yes," I answered quietly. "Oh." She looked me up and down. "Well, could you stand back there for now? We're about to do family photos. Family photos. Yet somehow, I wasn't part of the family. I stepped back without arguing. I'd lived a lifetime of being told where I did and didn't belong. Through the ceremony, no one spoke to me except a bridesmaid who offered a strained smile. Emily didn't introduce me to anyone. Not even Ethan's parents. I wasn't her mother today, I was a reminder of where she came from. And she wanted that part erased. As the music swelled and the couple danced their first dance, applause filled the ballroom. I clapped along, but my hands shook, not out of envy or regret, but from a truth rising inside me. She had forgotten me long before she threw that dress away. But something else was growing inside me too, strength. A kind I had buried under years of silence. At around midnight, when the band played loud enough to drown any whispers, I stood up. My legs trembled, but my resolve did not. I picked up the white bag containing the restored gown and stepped toward the center of the ballroom. One step. Another. Another. Slowly, conversations fell quiet. Heads turned. The music softened. People stared. Emily saw me, and her smile vanished instantly. "Mom," she whispered, visibly panicking. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Because the next words spoken in that ballroom belonged not to Emily, but to me. As I reached the center of the room and unzipped the white bag, no one, not even Emily, was prepared for what the restored gown looked like under the ballroom lights. When I reached the center of the ballroom, all eyes were on me. I could feel the weight of every stare, confusion from guests, irritation from the wedding planner, embarrassment radiating from my daughter. Emily's face drained of color. "Mom, please," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Sit down. Don't make a scene." But for once in my life, I wasn't listening to her. I slowly unzipped the white linen bag. The sound of the zipper echoed across the ballroom like a warning bell. Someone near the front gasped, and a ripple of whispers swept through the crowd. Then I lifted it, the dress. Only it wasn't the wrinkled, rejected thing Emily had tossed aside. Under the ballroom lights, the restored gown shimmered with a quiet elegance that even the most expensive designer dresses couldn't imitate. The hand-stitched pearls caught the light with a soft glow. The lace, American vintage lace I had spent nights restoring, looked ethereal. The beadwork along the bodice sparkled like frost on winter windows. It was beautiful. Unmistakably, undeniably beautiful. But more than its beauty, it held meaning. A hush fell over the room so complete that even the band lowered their instruments. Emily stared at the gown as if she didn't recognize it. What is that?" she whispered. I held it up gently. "Your wedding dress, Emily. The one you threw away." The guests murmured. Chairs shifted. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. Emily's friends, the same ones who had snickered when she trashed the gown, suddenly looked very small in their sequined dresses. Emily stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Mom, stop this." "No," I said softly, but firmly. "Not this time." I turned to the crowd. "This dress wasn't sewn with luxury fabric or Paris designers," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It was sewn with years of sacrifice. With nights I stayed awake so my daughter could have the life she has today." My words echoed. No one dared breathe. "Every stitch holds a piece of our story," I continued. "The story she forgot the moment she became ashamed of where she came from." Emily covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "And when she threw this dress in the trash, she didn't just throw away fabric. She threw away the love I poured into it." Her knees buckled slightly. Ethan moved toward her, but she stepped back, unable to look away from the gown. I raised it higher. "But I didn't throw it away," I said. "Because mothers don't abandon what they create. Even when their children abandon them." The ballroom exploded in applause, hesitant at first, then stronger, growing into something undeniable. People rose to their feet. Even Ethan's mother, who had looked down on me earlier, clapped with tears in her eyes. Emily collapsed into a chair, crying silently. I walked toward her and lowered the gown until it rested inches from her trembling hands. She reached for me, but I gently pulled back. "Not yet," I said softly. "Not until you understand what love really looks like." And then I turned, holding my restored gown, and walked through the ballroom as applause thundered behind me, each step closing a wound that had bled for years. That night, dignity walked with me. But what I didn't know was that the wedding spectacle was only the beginning, because within days, my daughter would show up at my house with the gown in her hands, and a truth I was not prepared to face. For 2 days after the wedding, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. People talked about the dress moment more than the vows or the decor. Some congratulated me. Others just stared, trying to understand why a quiet seamstress had suddenly become the center of a ballroom spectacle. But I didn't think about any of that. I stayed in my sewing room, mending small garments for clients, keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't drift to the ache in my chest. I hadn't heard from Emily. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a forced apology. But I didn't expect one. Not anymore. On the morning of the third day, I was hemming a prom dress when a soft knock sounded at my front door. I wiped my hands, walked across the living room, and froze when I saw who stood outside. Emily. Her hair was messy, mascara smudged, cheeks blotchy from crying. She looked small. Not the polished, perfect woman society adored, but the girl I once held as she cried over scraped knees. And in her hands, she held the restored gown. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world fell silent between us. "Mom," her voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked slowly into the house, the same house she once couldn't wait to leave. She placed the restored gown on the table gently, almost reverently, as if afraid it might break beneath her touch. "I opened it," she whispered. My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" I opened the inside of the dress. I stared at her, confused, until she said the words that hit me like a tidal wave. "I found the notes." The room tilted slightly. My breath stalled. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out the tiny folded messages I had sewn into the lining, the ones I wrote in secret during sleepless nights. Her fingers shook as she laid them out on the table. I didn't know, Mom," she cried. "I didn't know how much you'd done. I didn't know what you sacrificed. I didn't know you saved pieces of your wedding dress inside mine." Tears blurred her eyes. "I thought you were just trying to force your simple life onto me. But you were trying to give me our history. Our love." I swallowed hard. "You weren't supposed to see those." "But I did," she whispered. "And I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing your voice at the wedding, and I kept seeing this dress, glowing in front of everyone. Not because of the beads or lace, but because of you." She sank to her knees in front of me, something she hadn't done since she was a child. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I treated you like you were beneath me. Like you were an embarrassment." Her voice broke. "But I was the one who should have been ashamed." My heart softened, but years of hurt made me cautious. I reached out and lifted her chin. "Emily, you don't need my forgiveness," I said quietly. "You need to understand." She nodded, sobbing. "I want to. I want to learn. I want to fix us. Please, can I stay here for a few days?" Her voice trembled like a fragile promise. I took a slow breath. "Yes. You can stay." She let out a shaky sigh of relief. For the first time in years, she rested her head on my lap, the way she used to when storms scared her at night. The heaviness between us didn't disappear. But it shifted, loosened, began to heal. And as she cried quietly, I realized something. Sometimes the only way a daughter finds her mother is by losing herself first. But just when Emily and I began stitching our relationship back together, an unexpected visitor from her wedding would show up at my door, bringing a truth I never could have imagined. The next day felt calmer than any day I'd lived in years. Emily woke early, made us breakfast, something she hadn't done since she was 16, and sat beside me in the sewing room while I worked. She watched my hands move across fabric with quiet awe, the way a child watches magic. It wasn't perfect between us. It wasn't healed. But it was softening. For once, her silence wasn't a wall, it was an invitation. We had just finished washing the dishes when the doorbell rang. Emily dried her hands, glanced at me nervously, and went to answer it. The moment she opened the door, her face paled. Standing there, calm and elegant in a tailored coat, was Ethan's mother, Linda Ellington. The same woman who, at the wedding, had looked at me like I didn't belong. "Mrs. Ellington?" Emily stammered. "What are you?" "I need to speak with both of you," Linda said quietly. "Please." I stepped forward. "Come in." Her heels clicked softly across my floor, a sound that felt too fancy, too sharp, for my modest home. She didn't sit until I gestured to the dining table. Emily hovered beside me, every muscle tense. For a moment, Linda said nothing. She simply folded her hands and stared at her wedding ring like it held something heavy. Then she exhaled. "I suppose you don't remember me," she said, voice trembling. I blinked. "No. Should I?" Her eyes filled with an emotion I didn't expect, guilt. "Years ago," she began, "before your daughter was even in high school. I used to visit a tailor shop on Elm Street. A small place behind the pharmacy." My pulse quickened. I remembered that shop. I remembered those years. I remembered her. "You worked there," Linda whispered. "You were the woman who hemmed my dresses. The one I complained about. The one I spoke down to. The one I underpaid." Emily gasped softly and looked at me. My stomach twisted. Memories flashed, her sharp voice, her impatience, the days she dropped off clothes without a hello or thank you. "Yes," I said quietly. "I remember." Linda's voice broke. "I hurt you," she said. "And I recognized you the moment I saw you at the wedding." Emily's head snapped toward me. "Mom, why didn't you say anything?" "Because life hardened me in enough ways," I said softly. "I didn't need to reopen old wounds." Linda swallowed hard. "You have every right to hate me," she whispered. "But that night, when you held up that gown, I realized something." She looked up, tears glimmering. "I have spent my whole life buying what others created while looking down on the hands that made it." Her voice shook. "That night, you taught me that dignity isn't bought, it's earned." Emily stared at her in stunned silence. "I came to ask for your forgiveness," Linda said, voice cracking. "And, to offer something." My chest tightened. Offers from wealthy people always came wrapped in motives. But her next words stunned me. "I want to help you open your own sewing studio," she said. "Fully funded. Under your name." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. I simply stared, stunned. "I'm not offering charity," Linda continued. "I'm offering restitution. And respect. Something I should have given you decades ago." The room fell silent. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. All I knew was that the past, the piece of my life I thought was buried, had suddenly resurfaced in my living room. And with it, an opportunity that felt too big, too unexpected, too strange to trust. But before I could respond to Linda's shocking offer, she revealed something even more startling, something involving my late husband, and a secret she had kept hidden for decades. Linda Ellington's offer to fund my studio left my mind spinning, but before I could even process it, she took a shaky breath, and her next words changed the entire atmosphere in the room. "There's more I need to tell you," she whispered. Emily and I exchanged a look. My heart tightened, sensing the kind of truth that arrives like a storm, slow, dark, and impossible to outrun. Linda clasped her hands together as if steadying herself. Years ago, she began, before I married Ethan's father. I was reckless. Selfish. My mother was strict, controlling. I tried to rebel in the only ways I could. She paused. And during that time, I met a young man at the tailor shop where you worked. My pulse faltered. He was kind, she whispered. Soft-spoken. Honest. Nothing like the man I usually met. She swallowed. His name was Jason Brooks. My stomach dropped. Jason Brooks. My late husband. Emily's eyes widened. Dad, she breathed. Linda nodded painfully. I was infatuated with him, she admitted. But he made it clear he wasn't interested. And when he met you, he stopped speaking to me entirely. Her voice trembled. I didn't handle it well. Every muscle in my body stiffened. Linda, what are you saying? I asked, my voice barely audible. She wiped away a tear. I was there the day he died. The room froze. What? Emily whispered. Linda continued, voice cracking. I heard he'd been injured on a construction site. I rushed to the hospital, but I arrived too late. I never spoke to him again. Her chin trembled. But he was holding something. An envelope with your name on it. My breath caught. I saw it, she said. I held it. But I didn't give it to you. The world tilted around me. You kept it? I whispered, disbelief shaking my voice. I was young. Jealous. Immature. I told myself you wouldn't need it. That it wasn't important. But I knew I had no right. Tears streamed down her face. I have carried that guilt for decades. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, aged envelope. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft from time. My name, Maria Brooks, was written across the front in Jason's familiar handwriting. I brought my hand to my mouth as my knees nearly buckled. Emily covered her face, shaking as silent tears fell. I'm sorry, Linda whispered. I should have given this to you years ago. I should have respected you back then. I didn't. And I have regretted it every day. For a moment, none of us breathed. She set the envelope gently on my table. I don't expect forgiveness. But I owe you the truth. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The paper felt fragile, almost sacred. Mom, open it, Emily whispered. But my hand froze. Fear crept up my spine. Fear of what Jason had written. Fear of what I would discover. Fear of reopening a wound I had spent years stitching shut. Linda watched me with remorse clouding her eyes. I know this won't erase my mistakes, she said softly. But I hope it gives you the closure you deserved a long time ago. Then she added, almost in a whisper, and if you still want the studio, my offer stands. She stood up slowly, giving us space. Emily sat beside me, gripping my arm as if anchoring me to the present. I stared at the envelope, the final words of the man I had loved, the truth I had never been meant to live without. And with a trembling breath, I slid my thumb beneath the flap. But the moment I opened the letter, the first line of Jason's handwriting revealed a confession that neither Emily nor I were prepared to face, a truth stretching all the way back to the beginning of our marriage. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope, the soft rip of worn paper echoing louder than any sound in the room. Emily sat stiff beside me, clutching my arm as though she feared I might collapse. Linda watched from across the table, guilt stitched into every line of her face. Inside the envelope was a single folded sheet, thin, yellowed, faintly smelling of time. Jason's handwriting flowed across it in dark blue ink, familiar yet distant, like the echo of a voice I hadn't heard in decades. I inhaled deeply and began to read. My Maria, the letter began. The moment my eyes landed on those two words, my breath caught. Jason always called me that, my Maria, as if my name alone was a home he returned to. But the next line stopped my heart. If you are reading this, something has happened, and I couldn't tell you the truth in time. Emily's grip tightened. Truth? What truth? I continued. Before we married, I was forced into something I never wanted, a debt I inherited, not one I created. My pulse quickened. I took a loan to save my father's house, but the man who lent me the money wasn't a banker. And he never intended to let me go. My throat closed. Jason had never told me this. Not once. Emily whispered, Dad was in trouble? I nodded faintly and kept reading. He threatened me, Maria. Threatened us. He said that if I tried to escape the debt, he would hurt you. Hurt our future. My heart hammered painfully. I worked overtime, took extra shifts, even sold things I cherished. But I could never get ahead. The more I paid, the more he raised the price. A cold wave swept through me. Jason had been drowning, silently, while I thought we were simply struggling like any young couple. The next lines broke me completely. I never wanted you to know because I didn't want you to live in fear. You deserved a peaceful life. I thought I could fix it before it touched you. Tears blurred my vision. My husband had been protecting me, even as life crushed him. Then came the line that made my breath stop entirely. The day I got hurt on the job, it wasn't an accident. Emily gasped loudly. I froze, the words burning into my mind. I tried to stand up to him. Tried to tell him I wouldn't keep paying forever. We argued, and he warned me that I'd regret pushing him. My chest felt like it was collapsing. Hours later, on that scaffolding, someone loosened the bolts. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Linda looked stricken. If I don't make it, Maria. I need you to know none of this was your fault. You were the only good thing in my life. The only thing I ever did right. Tears streamed down my cheeks, dripping onto the letter. The final lines shook me to the core. I pray that someday Emily understands how deeply I loved both of you. And if you ever find this letter, please promise me one thing, don't be afraid of the truth. When I finished reading, silence swallowed the room. Emily sobbed openly, burying her face into my shoulder. Linda covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Oh my God. Maria, this wasn't just debt. This was... Yes, I whispered, my voice hollow. Someone killed my husband. The truth hung in the room like smoke. A truth I hadn't looked for. A truth that had lived in the shadows for years. A truth delivered decades too late. And suddenly, everything inside my life, my grief, my struggles, my loneliness, took on a new shape. This wasn't just a forgotten letter. This was a confession. A warning. A beginning. But before I could process Jason's final words, there was a sharp knock at my door, and the man standing outside was someone connected to my husband's past, someone who hadn't been seen in over 20 years. The sharp knock at the door jolted all three of us. The sound was too firm, too deliberate, not the nervous tapping of a neighbor or a package courier. Emily's head shot up, panic flickering in her eyes. Linda stiffened, clutching her purse as though it could shield her from whatever waited outside. I wiped my tears, folded Jason's letter gently, and stood. Stay here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I walked toward the door, each step heavy with dread. The letter was still burning in my hand, the truth swirling inside my mind like a storm I hadn't learned to navigate yet. When I opened the door, my breath caught. A tall man stood outside. Older now, with deep lines carved into his face, but unmistakable. His eyes, sharp, calculating, watchful, were the same. I knew that face. I had seen it once, years ago, standing beside Jason outside our old apartment, arguing in low voices. Jason had told me he was just an acquaintance, but the tension between them had been unmistakable. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Maria," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." Emily appeared behind me, eyes wide with fear. Linda froze completely. My voice came out hoarse. "What are you doing here?" He looked around the small living room, his jaw tightening as his gaze fell on Linda. "Well," he said with a bitter chuckle, "looks like I'm not the only ghost from the past today." Linda's face drained of color. "Frank," she whispered. Frank. The name from Jason's letter. The man who had lent him the money. The man who had threatened him. The man Jason feared. My stomach twisted. "What do you want?" I demanded, stepping protectively in front of Emily. Frank lifted his hands defensively. "Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble." "That's exactly what men like you always say before they do," I snapped. He let out a long sigh and rubbed his face with one hand, a gesture that made him look older, tired, almost defeated. "Look," he said, "I know what you just found out." "You opened the letter, right?" Emily gasped. "How do you know about the letter?" Frank paused. His expression shifted, something like guilt flickered through his eyes. "Because I'm the one who gave it to Jason," he admitted. "Years ago. Right before his accident." My blood went cold. "You knew he wrote it?" I whispered. He nodded. "And you knew he died because of you?" Frank flinched. I didn't loosen the bolts. "I swear on my life, Maria, I didn't kill him." Linda crossed her arms. "But you threatened him." Over and over. Frank nodded slowly, pain in his eyes. "I did. I was young and stupid. Working for men worse than me. Men who demanded money, threats, obedience. Jason was supposed to pay, but when he stopped, someone above me took matters into their own hands." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I left that life 20 years ago. But the guilt? It followed me everywhere." He looked directly at me. "I came to say I'm sorry. Not to ask for forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but to finally tell the truth." Behind me, Emily trembled. Linda was silent, her eyes shifting between us. Frank continued, voice cracking slightly. "I've spent years trying to track down the man who really caused the accident. And last month, I found him." My breath hitched. Emily clutched my arm. "He's still alive," Frank said, his voice dark and heavy. "And he's back in town." Silence fell like a hammer. He looked at me with an expression that chilled my bones. "And Maria, he knows you opened the letter." Before I could speak, Frank gave me a warning that made my blood run cold, a warning that would drag all of us into a danger I never imagined would emerge after all these years. Frank's words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Emily froze beside me, her fingers digging into my arm. Linda clutched the back of a chair, the color drained from her face. The house suddenly felt too small, too quiet, as though even the walls were bracing themselves for what he was about to say next. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean he knows?" Frank hesitated, then moved closer, lowering his voice. 2 weeks ago, the man who ordered Jason's accident was released from federal custody. He went off the radar for a while, but 3 days ago, he reached out to one of my old contacts. Asked about Jason's family. Asked if the letter ever resurfaced. My heartbeat stumbled. Emily whispered, "How would he even know about the letter?" Frank let out a humorless breath. He always knew Jason was writing something toward the end. He just didn't know what was inside it. And if he thinks that letter might expose him, he'll go after it. Or after anyone who has it. My stomach tightened. He doesn't know where I live. Frank shook his head slowly. "Maria, men like him don't lose track of unfinished business. They wait. They watch. They resurface when the people involved let their guard down. And the moment you brought that letter out, someone noticed. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Emily stepped forward, eyes blazing. You're saying we're in danger? After 20 years? Danger doesn't rot, Frank said quietly. It waits. I clenched my fists. I'm not running. I've spent my whole life afraid of being small, of being poor, of being forgotten. I won't live like that again. Frank studied me for a moment, then nodded with a hint of reluctant respect. You've always been stronger than you knew, he said. But strength isn't enough this time. You need protection. At least until he's found. Linda stepped forward, anger burning behind her tears. We should call the police. Frank shook his head. Without evidence? They'll write it off as paranoia from a decades-old case. This man knows how to stay invisible. If we want to stop him, we need leverage. He turned his gaze to the letter, Jason's final words. That's the leverage. His confession. If we get this into the right hands, the right legal channels, we can finally shut that man down. My fingers instinctively closed around the folded paper. For decades, this letter had been hidden from me. Now it was the key to ending a nightmare I never knew I was living. Emily stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. Mom, we'll do this together. You're not alone anymore. I brushed a tear from her cheek. No, sweetheart. I'm not. Linda wiped her eyes, straightening her posture. I'll help. I owe Jason more than I ever repaid. And I owe Maria even more than that. Frank exhaled. Then we need to move fast. Before he does. I nodded, resolve settling deep into my bones. Beads, seams, fabric, those were things I understood. But this? This new storm? I would face it the same way I faced every hardship in my life. Stitch by stitch. Step by step. Breath by breath. Because Jason deserved justice. And I deserved peace. But just as I began to gather the letter and prepare for whatever came next, Emily stepped toward the window and froze. Mom, she whispered, voice trembling. There's a man outside. My blood ran cold. Frank's expression hardened instantly. Describe him, he ordered. Emily swallowed hard. He's standing across the street, watching the house. And when I looked out that window, the face staring back at me was the last person I ever expected to see alive. Emily's breath hitched as she backed away from the window, her hand covering her mouth. I forced myself to move toward the glass, each step heavy, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Frank reached me in 2 strides and pulled the curtain slightly, just enough to see, not enough to be seen. I followed his gaze. And then my blood went cold. A man stood across the street beside a dark sedan. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending to be a passerby. He simply stood there, arms crossed, staring directly at my house as if he already knew everything happening inside it. His hair was streaked with gray, his jaw sharp, eyes hard as stone. I knew that face. Not from memories of kindness or friendship, but from nightmares I didn't understand until today. I had seen him once, years ago, standing across the street from our apartment the night Jason and I argued about money. I thought he was a stranger waiting for someone. Jason had gone pale and closed the curtains immediately. Now I understood why. Linda placed a shaking hand on her chest. Is that? Yes, Frank said darkly. That's him. Emily grabbed my hand. Mom, we have to call the police. Right now. Frank shook his head. If we call too soon, he disappears. Like smoke. He's done this for years, watches first, approaches later. He wants to rattle you. Well, I snapped, stepping away from the window, he succeeded. But anger was rising too, anger at years of suffering I never knew came from one man's cruelty. Anger at the letter hidden from me. Anger at a life Jason lived in fear. I wasn't afraid now. Not the way he expected me to be. Frank moved toward the door. No sudden moves. He'll take it as a challenge. Challenge? Emily whispered. He's stalking us. Frank didn't turn around. That man doesn't stalk. He hunts. The room fell silent. Linda clutched my arm. Maria, you need to stay inside. But something inside me refused to shrink. I stepped toward the door. Maria! Emily grabbed my wrist. Are you out of your mind? I looked at my daughter, the girl I stitched dresses for, the girl I raised through storms, the girl who had thrown away my work yet found her way back to me. And I realized something. Fear had ruled my life long enough. I won't spend another day hiding from a man who destroyed our lives, I said, voice steady. Frank blocked the door with his arm. You walk out there, and you won't scare him. You'll excite him. I froze. He enjoys fear, Frank whispered. It's the only currency he understands. Linda shook her head. Maria, don't. Please. My knees wavered. The weight of Jason's letter pressed against my chest. For a moment, I felt the urge to scream, to collapse, to beg for answers that would never come. But then something unexpected happened. The man across the street lifted his hand, not waving, not threatening, but signaling. A gesture that looked almost like a slow, mocking salute. Like he was saying, I know you saw me. And I'm not going anywhere. Frank stepped back from the curtain. We need a plan, he said. A real one. Not panic. Not impulse. Emily grabbed my shoulders. Mom, please, don't go outside. I pulled her into a tight embrace. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. But when I looked back toward the window, the man was gone. Like smoke. Like a ghost. Like danger with legs. Frank cursed under his breath. This means he's making his move. And we're running out of time. I exhaled slowly, gripping Jason's letter in my hands. If this man wanted to finish what he started 20 years ago, he was about to learn something new about me. I wasn't the woman he remembered. I wasn't the frightened seamstress from his past. I wasn't alone anymore. I was a mother with a mission. And a truth that could finally destroy him. But before we could decide our next step, my phone buzzed with an unknown number, and the voice on the other end sent a chill through my soul, because he knew my name. The moment the unknown number flashed across my phone screen, time seemed to thicken around me. Emily grabbed my wrist, shaking her head in panic. Frank's eyes sharpened instantly. Linda took a step away as if bracing herself for an impact none of us could see. The phone vibrated again. Unknown caller. My breath hitched. Maria, don't answer it, Emily whispered, her voice breaking. But I knew I had to. Because monsters don't disappear just because you hide. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. Hello? My voice came out steadier than I expected. A silence. A low breath. Then a voice, smooth, cold, and disturbingly calm. Hello, Maria. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a stranger's voice. This wasn't the voice of someone guessing his way into intimidation. He said my name like he had practiced it. Like he had tasted it before. Like he finally found what he'd been waiting for. I swallowed hard. Who is this? A soft chuckle crackled through the speaker. Don't insult me. You know exactly who I am. Frank stiffened, inching closer as if he could somehow hear the voice himself. Where is the letter? The man asked slowly. Jason's letter. The one you should never have opened. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm not giving you anything. His tone shifted, sliding into something darker. You should be careful, Maria. Truths like these, they have a way of destroying entire families. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She mouthed, hang up. But something in me refused to bend. Not anymore. I took a deep breath. Why did you kill my husband? The silence on the other end was long enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. Then he whispered. I didn't kill him, not directly. Frank's face twisted with rage, but I motioned him to stay quiet. The man continued, voice smooth as poison. But Jason tried to defy me. He tried to walk away. That was his mistake. My stomach nodded. You loosened the bolts, I whispered. A soft laugh. No, Maria. I don't get my hands dirty. I have people who do that for me. My knees weakened, but my rage kept me standing. You ruined his life. You ruined our life. For what? A debt? Debts are business, he replied. But defiance? His voice hardened. Defiance is personal. Frank muttered a curse under his breath. The man continued, his tone calculating. You have the letter. I need it. And if you cooperate, no one gets hurt. Emily stepped forward and grabbed my free hand, clinging to it like it was her last lifeline. My voice shook, but my resolve didn't. I'm not giving you anything. The man exhaled slowly, a sound that felt like a warning. You're braver than your husband was, he murmured. But bravery without wisdom will get you killed. Is that a threat? I snapped. No, he replied softly. That's a promise. Before I could respond, the line went dead. Emily burst into tears. Frank rushed to the window. Linda sat down shakily, her breath uneven. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone. Frank turned toward me, his face grim. You just declared war. But something inside me, something buried for years, finally awakened. No, I whispered. He did that the moment he killed my husband. Emily looked up, her voice trembling. Mom, what do we do now? I held Jason's letter to my chest and felt strength surge through me. We finish what your father started, I said. We expose him. Frank nodded slowly. Then we need proof. Real proof. And we're running out of time, Linda whispered. I exhaled shakily. Then we'd better start now. But before any of us could move, before we could form a plan, before we could even breathe again. Another knock echoed, louder, more urgent than before. This time, it wasn't a stranger at the door. It was someone I never expected to see again. And when I opened the door, the person standing there held a piece of evidence that would turn the entire investigation upside down, and reveal the truth about Jason's final hours. The pounding on the door echoed through the house like a warning drum. Emily jumped. Linda covered her mouth. Frank reached instinctively toward his waistband, a habit formed long before today. I steadied myself, tucked Jason's letter safely inside my pocket, and approached the door with a heart beating far too loudly. When I opened it, I froze. Standing on my porch, soaked from the sudden evening rain, was Officer Daniel Harper, the same local officer who had handled Jason's accident 2 decades ago. His uniform was different now, heavier with badges, but his eyes were the same. Tired. Burdened. Knowing. Maria, he breathed, his voice shaky. I heard, someone from Jason's past surfaced. Frank stepped beside me like a protective shadow. How did you hear so fast? Officer Harper didn't flinch. Because I've been waiting 20 years for this. My breath caught. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, sealed evidence envelope, one I had never seen before. He held it as though it contained the weight of a lifetime. I kept this, he said quietly. Even when I shouldn't have. Emily stepped closer. What is it? A recording. Harper's voice cracked. A voicemail Jason left the night before he died. It came to the station automatically because his phone was damaged at the site. My pulse stumbled. "You never told me?" I whispered. Guilt washed over his face. "I wanted to. I swear I did. But the case was closed before I even blinked." "And the man behind your husband's death?" His jaw tightened. "He had connections. Bigger than this town. Bigger than the department. I was told the recording was irrelevant. I was ordered to destroy it." "But you didn't," Frank muttered. "No," Harper said. "I couldn't do it. Jason was a good man. I told myself one day the truth would matter." A trembling breath escaped me. "Why now?" Officer Harper looked directly into my eyes. "Because the man who killed your husband is back in this county. And if he finds out Jason left a trace, he'll come after anyone who has it." Linda shuddered. "He already knows." Harper's face darkened. "Then you don't have much time." He handed me the envelope, his fingers shaking. Inside was a small audio cassette. Old. Dusty. But intact. The kind of evidence that could crack open a cold case. "Play it somewhere safe," Harper said. "Not here. Not while he's watching." Emily squeezed my hand, fear pulsing through her grip. "Mom, we can't run forever." "I'm not running," I whispered. "I'm going to listen." Frank nodded. "Then we move quick. My guy downtown still owes me a favor. He can digitize the audio tonight." But before we could take a step, Harper lifted a hand. "There's something else," he said. "A detail I never put in the report." We all turned toward him. "The bolts on that scaffold," he continued. "They weren't just loosened. They were cut clean through, with a blade only one kind of man uses." Frank's expression shifted instantly, recognition flashing in his eyes. Harper nodded grimly. "You know who I'm talking about." Frank swore under his breath. I hoped he was dead. The room tensed, fear twisting into something deeper, dread. "Who is he?" Emily whispered. Harper looked at me with sorrow in his eyes. "The man who killed your husband," he said, "wasn't acting alone." My stomach twisted violently. "What do you mean?" Harper hesitated before delivering the truth. "He had a partner." Silence consumed the house. Emily stiffened beside me. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Frank cursed softly, running a hand through his hair. I felt the world shift, the ground beneath me tilting as reality rewrote itself again. A partner? Another man involved? Someone else responsible? My voice trembled. "Do you know his name?" Harper nodded slowly. And what he said next made my legs nearly give way. "The second man involved in Jason's death," Harper whispered, "was someone you once trusted, someone who knew your family." Officer Harper's words hit the room like a physical blow. "The second man involved in Jason's death was someone you once trusted, someone who knew your family." My heart lurched painfully, like it tripped over itself. Emily stepped closer, as if bracing for impact. Frank tensed, jaw tight. Linda covered her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. I forced air into my lungs. "Who?" My voice came out thin, almost childlike. Harper didn't answer immediately. He looked at me with the heaviness of a man who had carried a truth too long. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, a picture taken long before Jason died. He handed it to me. The moment I looked at it, my breath caught. The photo showed Jason standing beside two men. One was Frank, young, reckless, sharp-eyed. The other. My hand shook violently. Emily leaned in. "Mom, who is that?" I swallowed, a chill crawling up my spine. "He lived in our old neighborhood," I whispered. He used to help Jason with odd jobs. And sometimes he'd come by for dinner. I blinked hard, unable to stop the tremor in my voice. His name was Mark Reynolds. Emily's eyes widened. Uncle Mark? Mom, that Mark Reynolds? I nodded slowly. To Emily, he had been the friendly neighbor who brought her candy on Halloween. The man who helped fix our fence for free. The one who used to laugh with Jason on the porch on summer nights. A man I once trusted. A man who had held my daughter when she was a toddler. Officer Harper stepped closer. Mark wasn't what he seemed, Maria. He worked with the man who threatened Jason. He used to collect debts. He was known for staying invisible, blending in as the nice guy. I stared at the photo, nausea twisting in my stomach. I never knew, I whispered. Harper shook his head. None of us did. That's why he was so dangerous. Frank ran a hand through his hair. I thought he vanished years ago. Went underground. Harper nodded grimly. He did. But now he's resurfaced. Emily could barely speak. Her voice cracked. Why would he hurt Dad? Harper answered softly. Because Jason trusted him. And men like Mark exploit trust. My throat tightened. Jason had trusted that man. Let him into our home. Shared meals with him. Called him a friend. And Mark had repaid him with betrayal and death. The room felt unbearably small, filled with ghosts I never invited. Frank exhaled harshly. If Mark is back, then this is worse than we thought. He's smarter than the other guy. Cleaner. Quieter. He doesn't make threats, he just finishes jobs. Linda shuddered. Maria, what if he's the one watching the house? That thought slammed into my chest like a punch. I closed my eyes, the image of the man across the street flashing in my mind. The posture. The cold stare. The stillness. No, that wasn't Mark. That man looked older, harder. But Mark? Mark would be the one I wouldn't recognize now. That realization terrified me more than anything. Emily pressed her forehead against my shoulder, trembling. What do we do, Mom? I wrapped my arms around her tightly. We stay together, I whispered. We stay smart. And we find the truth. Before Harper could respond, Frank's phone buzzed sharply. He looked at the screen, and every drop of color drained from his face. Maria, he said slowly, you need to sit down. My heart pounded. What happened? He showed me the phone. A message. No name. No number. Just one line. Tell Maria she's next. My breath vanished. Emily gasped. Harper swore under his breath. Frank stepped back as if punched. But it wasn't the message that terrified me the most. It was the photo attached below it. A photo taken just minutes earlier. Of me at my window. But the biggest shock came when Harper zoomed in on the reflection in the glass, revealing a face standing behind me, a face none of us expected to see inside my own home. When Frank zoomed in on the photo, the room fell into a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. The closer the image became, the colder my body felt. Emily leaned in, her breath trembling. Officer Harper squinted, adjusting the screen. That's impossible, Linda whispered. But it wasn't impossible. It was horrifyingly real. Because the reflection behind me, standing inside my house, only a few feet away, was a face I recognized instantly. Mark Reynolds. Older. Thinner. Eyes emptier than I remembered. But it was him. The man who had pretended to be Jason's friend. The man who had eaten at my table. The man who had played with my daughter. The man who had helped kill my husband. My knees almost gave way. He was inside the house? Emily cried, panic flooding her voice. Frank grabbed his keys. We need to search this place right now. No, Harper said sharply. If he's smart, and he is, he's long gone. I couldn't breathe. My own home. The place where I had rebuilt myself year after year. And he had stood behind me without making a sound. Emily grabbed both my hands. Mom, look at me. Are you okay? No. I wasn't. But I had to be. I steadied myself and looked at Harper. What do we do now? Harper inhaled slowly. We end it. Tonight. Before either of them gets another chance. Frank nodded. The letter. The recording. That's our leverage. We get it digitized, make multiple copies, and send them to the people who can force a case. FBI, state investigators, journalists. Linda stepped forward, voice trembling but determined. And I'll fund whatever legal battle comes next. Emily squeezed my arm. We'll fight this together, Mom. For the first time, I didn't feel like a seamstress standing alone against the world. I felt surrounded. Protected. Strengthened. We moved quickly. Frank drove us to a trusted contact, a quiet tech guy who worked out of a garage and owed him favors from his old life. Harper followed in his patrol car, watching every shadow on the road. Inside the garage, the cassette was digitized. The audio file was saved. Copies were backed up on multiple devices. And then, we listened. Hearing Jason's voice again broke something inside me. He sounded scared. Desperate. Trying to protect us until his final breath. Emily cried into my shoulder. Linda wiped her tears silently. Even Frank looked away, grief sharpening his features. And in that recording, Jason said clearly, if something happens to me, it's because of Mark and his boss. Proof. The truth he died trying to tell. Officer Harper uploaded everything to a secure law enforcement database. Then he looked at me and said, Maria, you're safe now. For the first time in decades. I believed it. The arrests happened within 48 hours. Mark was found hiding in an abandoned motel. His boss was captured trying to flee the state. The case reopened nationwide. Jason's name was cleared. The world finally learned what he went through, and what he overcame until the day his courage cost him his life. At his reopened memorial, Emily held the restored gown in her hands, tears trickling down her cheeks as she whispered. Dad would be proud of you, Mom. I smiled softly, gazing at the gown, no longer a symbol of rejection, but of resilience. No, I whispered. He'd be proud of us. I placed a hand over my heart. And this time, we finish our story together. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to backhand index pointing right, like the video. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe for more emotional storytelling. Backhand index pointing right, share this story with someone who loves dramatic, twist-filled narratives. Backhand index pointing right, comment your thoughts, your feedback inspires the next stories. Your support helps me continue creating powerful stories for you. Red Heart.